guys, it's Dave. Welcome back to another video. Before anything else, I did just quickly want to re-thank a couple of the new channel members because, I did mention them in the previous video, but that one didn't get too many views and I figured maybe they'd missed it. So thank you once again, Ann Lansoon, Sam, and Teddy. All three of you, much appreciated, joining the channel members if you didn't happen to see that in the last video. Okay, with that out of the way, today I do just want to give you a quick wrap-up of Rocket Lab's Q1 earnings call. It's something I was planning to do sooner, but obviously I got sidetracked with the interview with Peter Beck and Adam Spice, as well as some other stuff that came up recently. Didn't want to miss it, though, because I know a lot of people don't have time to watch the entire hour-and-a-half plus earnings call. I did live stream it and some of you guys watched it with me and, hung out while we made notes and stuff like that. So that was great, but I totally understand if you don't have time for that. So hopefully we can wrap up the biggest takeaways from the earnings call as well as my thoughts on it in, under 15 minutes or so. And if you do find some value in this kind of thing, hope you'll consider hitting that like and subscribe button, as well as dropping a comment below. All those YouTube things always help out with the algorithms. With that out of the way, let's dive into Rocket Lab's Q1 results and my thoughts on them. First up, updates on the Archimedes engine. This is something we were all looking for in Q1, kind of the long pole in the tent, if you were, when it comes to Neutron development and the thing that would really hold up the entire show. So really important for the company. And while some of us were hoping that they kind of had already done some hot fires and they were just waiting to share the video of it, that was not the case, but we did get some great updates with pictures of the engine and information that it's already at the test stand at Stennis, getting ready for that hot fire campaign. If you're not too familiar with it, it's not just like, okay, one test fire and then they're done. They do all sorts of tests with different scenarios, different pressures, pushing things further than they expect to go in launch scenarios, and it's a whole long campaign. So that is getting ready to go, and we've heard some updates from the company after the earnings call that they're getting very close to starting that whole campaign of hot fires. We do have a picture here with some people standing next to the engine for scale. Again, yeah, I'm not a rocket engineer, but it looks pretty cool to me. Another shot next to the smaller Rutherford engine, I believe, and then the team. Love to see it. They're, I think it's cool that it's such a young group and they're clearly so enthusiastic and really into it. So yeah, this picture I think says a lot, and they are making great progress. Another shot from the side here. You can really tell, like, these things are so complicated with all this plumbing and wires and stuff. Amazing, really, that what they're able to accomplish. Continuing on with a few fun pictures before we dive into some of the numbers. We did get some pictures from the launch pad, or what will be the launch pad, and their launch infrastructure. That cool Rocket Lab water tower now in position, which will, of course, provide the water for the deluge system to ensure there's no damage to the ground systems. Close-up here of the Rocket Lab logo looks very nice and will have a big part in that Wallops skyline for the foreseeable future, as Wallops really has a lot of plans to continue to grow, and Rocket Lab is going to be a very big part of that, should be probably the biggest part of that going forward, although there are many other companies also looking to launch from this location. Just another angle of a shot here with the infrastructure. You can see some concrete footings have been going in, obviously the big tower, and work continues there. Just to the right over here is more where Electron will launch from, so obviously very close by. This just down the road, like 5 minutes down the road, is the Neutron Assembly and Integration Complex. It's just outside the NASA Wallops Gate. They already have this temporary tent structure here they can use to assemble Neutron equipment, but they're building a more permanent, larger facility right next to it here, although I have to say it's a little bit smaller than I expected, and I do wonder if that's because they were able to acquire the Virgin Orbit facilities at such a steep discount, as well as that Maryland facility that used to be owned by Lockheed Martin for manufacturing some of these carbon composite structures, and maybe they just don't need as much space at Wallops itself. That's complete speculation on my part, of course, but anyway, we do have this building taking shape pretty quickly. This image is probably now like a week out of date, so I wouldn't be surprised if the entire 4 sides of the structure were completed, and they're even making more progress on that today. Talking a little about the Neutron development, because it's something we've all been watching very closely. Obviously, Rocket Lab is spending a ton of money on Neutron, and it should bring in a ton of money once that development is finished, so we really want to keep a close eye on it. They have completed first Neutron fairing panels, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. They're on track for full set to be complete and assembled in the coming weeks. The assembly test run of stage 2, the internal tank structure, we already saw one of those with the test to destruction previously, has been completed, and they will be doing final assembly, lamination, and integration in flight configuration of that, as well as production of Neutron's largest carbon composite structures is underway. So a lot of these structures are starting to take shape, and it's pretty exciting. Let's take a look at some pictures of it. You have some tanks here. I believe this is the part of that second stage tank being built. Large carbon composite panels here taking shape. I believe these would be around near the base of the vehicle. This image confused me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. I think we have a larger one right here. Just the shape of it. To me, it looks almost like a fairing panel if they were still doing that old 4-piece design, but we do know they're going to a Hungry Hippo design, so maybe this will just fit together with other pieces as a part of some kind of tank structure. Let me know if you know exactly what that is down in the comments below. And then we can see, some large carbon composite pieces coming together. Obviously, this would be for the body of Neutron. Okay, next up, they did tell us a little bit about the upcoming launch schedule of Electron. So we have already launched this case and NASA launch previously with that solar sail we all watched together. There is 2 back-to-back NASA pre-fire missions coming up. Now, the first one is believed to be coming up very soon in the next 5-ish days, I think, and then the next one not long after that. Then there's a Archimedes mission to deploy a constellation of small sats for that company, and a potential 5th launch that they're not entirely sure will end up getting squeezed into the quarter. So they didn't want to guide for it in case it doesn't happen, but they think there's a decent chance they could squeeze it in, which if it does happen would be obviously quite bullish for the quarter because that's more revenue and better numbers for the company. They announced a big new contract for the Solario business, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is their solar manufacturer within the company that they acquired several years back. This is a $150 million deal to supply solar cells with a space prime. So one of the big old school space companies could be like a Raytheon, Lockheed, one of those guys. Hard to know for sure. But anyway, definitely a serious customer, a space prime who will be able to pay for the components, no problem. This is a multi-year agreement. Initial additions to the backlog of approximately 30 million in Q1, and I guess more additions later on. So maybe that's not all hitting the backlog right now, which will be important as we check what the backlog is later on in the presentation. And just saying that they will support critical missions, which you always really expect with Solario because they're really high efficiency, bespoke, expensive solar cells as opposed to like the super cheap mass manufactured solar cells that you might get put on like a large constellation of small satellites. There was some information given on Electron's reusability. I'm not going to go through all the details here, but the exciting thing is after previously saying they didn't think they would reuse an Electron first stage booster this year, they kind of said now they might. So it'll be exciting to see if that does end up happening. I can't wait for the first successfully reflown booster. Making progress on it. They've completed several tests on a recovered booster, including pressurizing it, using helium to check for leaks and structural tests. So that's all good news. In terms of the numbers now, something, of course, we might not have as much fun looking at, but is extremely important to follow. 69% year-on-year revenue increase. This, for me, is an absolutely amazing number. Some people, just give it a meh or whatever because they already told us previously this was coming. So feel like if they tell you, 4 months ago that an amazing number is coming, and then they announce that they did hit an amazing number, there's not as much excitement, unfortunately, but I think there should be, because 69%, that's amazing growth and what I really want to see with this company going forward. Quarter over quarter growth, 55%, still incredibly strong, and $93 million of revenue in the quarter. Unfortunately, just falling short of that $100 million mark. We were kind of hoping. It's more of a milestone than anything, not really significant whether it's 93 or 100 other than that just being a round number, but hopefully they will hit that next quarter. So obviously great growth. We have some charts here showing launch versus space systems in terms of revenue, with about 60 million coming from space systems. Amazing growth from that side of the business, and 37 from launch. Obviously, launch, there's been a little bit of trouble scheduling it with customer readiness and that kind of thing, so we were hoping it would be higher, but still pretty solid numbers historically when you're looking at Q1 of 2023, only $19 million. Now, talking about that backlog, and remember, apparently only 30 million of the 100 million is initially hitting the backlog, so it did drop 2.9%, which is not bad, really, which basically means they executed on more backlog than they added, so they didn't sign as many new contracts as they earned in money, but it's only 2.9% decrease, not small, not massive, so not really too concerning to me. Backlog still remains above $1 billion. It's a solid size. They have said in the Q&A, and I'll cover that in more detail later, that they're chasing several very large contracts, which could be very exciting for the company. So 2.9% drop, not a big deal, especially considering that the entirety of that solar deal was not added to backlog yet. Only 30 million of the 150 million is my understanding. And once again, they expect approximately 42% of this backlog to be recognized within 12 months. So that gives us a really good idea of how much money they think they'll be making in the next 12 months. And that's the guidance I have been using to do my own financial model that you guys have seen previously. In terms of operating expenses, we're looking not bad. So Q1 2024 had 38.5 million R&D expenses and 28.8 in terms of selling, general, and admin. If you watched me previously, you know I don't have any problem with a high R&D number, because that means they're investing in the future and Neutron, which they need to do to bring it to production and get it ready to go and eventually earn all those revenues. I do like to see the SG&A try to remain low, because that's the administrative side that doesn't necessarily bring in as much money depending on the role. Obviously, sales is an important piece as well. But yeah, not bad. We expect the growth in R&D to continue until Neutron comes to the pad. And they even said in the notes here, increased due to a step up in Neutron development spending within propulsion and mechanical related functions. So if they have to spend a bit more to get Archimedes going with that big milestone we're all looking for, I am totally okay with that. And this chart I found particularly interesting. So we are looking at non-GAAP free cash flow activities for the quarter, and we're looking at a quarter over quarter chart. The red is purchases of property, equipment, and software. Now, do remember, if you're converting money into property and equipment, that stuff still stays on your balance sheet as assets because it still has value. So yes, they're spending money on property and machines and equipment. That property is still worth just as much. The machines will depreciate, but they still have a lot of value to them right now. So it's not really like it's completely off the balance sheet or anything like that. And on the operating cash flow side, pretty exciting here. Now, this is just operating, right? Not everything including R&D, but in terms of operations, they're seeing just a negative 2.6, so almost hitting that break-even mark for operating cash flow, which is pretty exciting, driven by improved revenue and working capital due to increases in launch and satellite program revenue. So very exciting number there, and again, the red, which is the bigger amount, is equipment and facilities, which is absolutely needed for Neutron, so that's okay, and these are kind of like one-time expenses, if you will, as they try to get Neutron up and running. Profitability trends, this one, it was okay. I was hoping it would be a little higher. So in terms of quarter over quarter, we had the big jump in revenue from 60 million to 93, which I was very excited about. But I was hoping with that and that scale, we would see some slightly improved gross margins. That didn't happen. Margins stayed flat. Usually when you think things scale up, you get better margins. So hopefully that happens more in the future. But we still have 32% and 26% gross margins right now. It's expected to continue to improve over time, and we can see that it has improved over the last 4 quarters from 22-ish to 26 now, and on the top line 29 to 32-ish. So hopefully those continue to improve. Long term, you're looking for gross margins to be maybe mid 40s, I think would be reasonable. I think we're talking maybe 40% on space systems and 50% for launch. Maybe eventually when they operate their own constellation, they can get that space application side past 50% even. Who knows on that? There's been no guidance, but that could be exciting as well. They do say that attaining adjusted EBITDA break even, which is a milestone we've all been looking for very closely, is dependent on the above factors. We're talking about gross margin trends as well as the pace of Neutron related investment. So hopefully in the coming quarters, we can see these 32 and 26 numbers in terms of GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins continue to trend upward. In terms of outlook for the next quarter, they're talking between $105 to $110 million. So obviously that would achieve the massive milestone of a $100 million quarter for the first time. Very exciting. Space Systems would be 77 to 81 million of that, which is a very solid amount. And they're currently planning for 4 launches, as we've talked about previously, with a potential 5th launch that they hope they can get in, but they're not guiding for it because they're not entirely sure, and it's not all under their control. GAAP gross margin 24 to 26, so pretty flat from the previous quarter, and 30 to 32, pretty flat as well. As we saw these numbers here, 32 and 26. So on the high end, it'll be flat. Hopefully it doesn't end up being down quarter over quarter. Looking at an adjusted EBITDA loss of Q2 for about $24 million. So a few things I did make a note of in the Q&A that I figured I'd share with you guys. They're looking to recognize the majority of the MDA contract, that big I think it was 150-ish, maybe 130-ish million dollar contract, peaking in Q3 and Q4, which is a very big deal for Space Systems. Talked about acquisition opportunities and talked about a deal pipeline with potentially, it sounded like to me, multiple acquisitions, not just one. So maybe we're looking at multiple smaller companies, which kind of tracks with the subcontracting they announced on their SDA constellation for payload. They announced like 4 or 5 companies they're subcontracting various payload portions to. So if all that kind of stuff that they're currently having to subcontract is the kind of capability they're looking to bring in-house, might make sense that we're looking at more than one acquisition. Neutron budget is still on track. The delays pushing it a little bit more to the high end of $300 million, between 250 to 300, which is still pretty great for a medium-sized rocket development program. Not worried about Neutron demand at all. They seem incredibly confident in Neutron demand, which is nice to hear because all of us keep talking about when's that first contract, who's it going to be, where's their backlog, because we hear companies like Relativity talking about their big backlogs. Rocket Lab super confident, not going to offer discounts for Neutron because it's not ready. They're just going to wait until it's ready. They were asked about book-to-bill expectations, which is like how many new contracts you add to your backlog versus how much you realize from that backlog. So that would be, the backlog shrinking or growing. They said they are continuing to chase big deals. Components are growing nicely, and the Neutron contracts being much larger than Electron, of course, will significantly move the needle when that starts to happen. He also mentioned, Adam, that they're looking at similar program sizes to the SDA deal, which is $500 million and half their total backlog right now, which is incredibly exciting. So if they sign just a single another contract the size of that SDA deal, that's like a 50% growth in the backlog right now. So very massive deals they're looking to sign, as opposed to a lot of small ones from what it sounds like. They consider Electron to have a pretty healthy contract pipeline, including multi-launch deals under discussion, which you'd like to see as opposed to the one-offs. Peter was kind of pushed on the launch cadence of Electron for the year because it doesn't seem like they're on track to hit that 22 launches anymore. Wouldn't give a firm number, but he said, look, we have line of sight to launch maybe a couple less than 22, so it sounds like maybe 18 would be a reasonable number. Maybe 19 or 20 is certainly possible. He did say 11 would be a big disappointment if that's what happened, but a lot of this just depends on customer readiness, so not all under their control. And note that the customers who are not ready have already paid 90% of their fees, and Rocket Lab just doesn't realize that on the books until it actually launches, but the customers aren't getting that cash back. So, yeah, it's going to happen eventually. He was asked about potentially raising prices in the space systems business, and I thought this was interesting. He said, look, we're already not winning our contracts because we have the lowest price. We're winning these big contracts because we can offer scheduling certainty and reliability, because Rocket Lab has that reputation of always delivering, and they have all those components in-house, so they can guarantee the scheduling on these deals, which for a lot of big organizations is even more important than the price, is delivering when you need them to be ready. In terms of the big SDA contract and the revenue on that, it's pretty much immaterial in Q1. There'll be some more in Q2, and it will build throughout 2024, but they're not ready to give firm numbers on that yet. So thinking about all this, and what I'm thinking about for the stock is what I consider to be the 2025-2026 double whammy, at least what I'm hoping for. That is a couple things. So on the expenses side, we have the R&D, which keeps ramping because of Neutron, and it's going to keep ramping as Neutron gets closer and closer to launching. Hopefully, as soon as Neutron is ready, that will drop significantly, because most of their spend in getting their production ready, buying their machines, building out their infrastructure, and all the rest will be done. So there'll still be some R&D, of course, as they look to continue to improve Neutron and all the rest. But hopefully it will drop extremely significantly, which will be good for profitability numbers. Simultaneously, on the other side, revenue should jump significantly, because even just a single Neutron launch is equivalent of more than 5 Electron launches, which is very material to that top line. So in 2025, you're looking at maybe 1 Neutron launch. If there's a payload on it, $50 million, that's very big. So you're getting a drop in R&D simultaneously with an increase in the top line revenue, is really what I'm excited for, and hoping the stock will react favorably, especially if that's around the time they hit profitability. Then 2026, we're looking at 3 launches of Neutron, which would be $150 million. That's, more than they're making in a quarter right now, significantly more. We're looking at maybe $100 million a quarter, 3 Neutron launches. That's 150. So that's, 30+% growth overall for the company versus this year, just on those 3 revenue launches. Should be pretty good, especially when you think about potential R&D reductions. That's what I'm really hoping. The stock will skyrocket to the levels that I think it should deserve. Again, this part is just all opinion by me, of course, not something that they, talked about explicitly in the earnings call. One other item, now this wasn't in the actual earnings presentation, but it was in the SEC filing, which I do encourage you to take a look at if you've never looked at them before, because they break out a lot of the charts and financial information in there. But I always just like to look at the breakdown between launch services and space systems, and it really goes to show why I talk about space systems so much, and I'm like such a huge fan of it, even more than Electron. Looking at the growth from the same period last year, space systems had 35 million. It grew like over 25 million to 60. So that is extremely material. Launch had good growth as well from 19 to 32, but space systems scaling really well for me. And we're looking at gross profit numbers of around $8 million. So good top line revenue growth for both sides of the business, very strong. We're looking for launch to continue growing in the coming quarters, and space systems continuing to scale as well, with a lot of revenue being recognized from the reaction wheels as well as the MDA Globalstar contract, where they'll be realizing a lot of that contract value this year. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the quarter, pretty happy with the top line growth. A lot of people are concerned that if you do the math, it's looking like for Q2 in the next 2 quarters, the growth is going to be pretty flat the rest of the year. So we're talking at 105 to 110 million, maybe the next 2 quarters as well. To me, that's no problem. They've already grown revenues 69% year over year, 50-something% quarter over quarter, and just maintaining this level, which I consider to be like a step up, a step change for the remainder of the year without any sort of slide back, I think is good news, and we'll look for a next leg up in revenue growth when we start recognizing more of that SDA deal, as well as Neutron finally starting to launch, getting Electron reusability to save some cash, and having 20 plus launches on Electron in the coming years as well. So to me, everything's pointed in the right direction. I'm looking for big stock growth, as I said, 2025, 2026. And right now, I feel like they're really laying the groundwork for all of it. Now that they have that new capital raise, I don't really have a lot of concerns around the cash in the bank. So I'm feeling pretty good about the company overall. And as I said in previous videos, I did add new shares in the mid 3s, around 3.6. Feeling pretty good about it myself, but let me know how you guys are feeling down in the comments below. Let me know as well if there's anything I missed or what you felt was the most important part of the earnings call. Thank you for staying till the end. If you found this valuable, I hope you will consider subscribing, or if you're already a subscriber, hitting that like button, because it does help out with the algorithm. I hope you guys have a great day and a great rest of the week. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.